Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's session. We've got a full agenda for today, but I thought let's just start off by saying good morning and welcome. I see a few names that I already know, but I also see a few new names, so that is fantastic. Today's session is webinar one of a series of 2 sessions or 2 webinars. So just make sure if you attended the session on Tuesday afternoon, today's session, this session that we're going to do now, is exactly the same as that one. If you want to attend the second session that follows on Tuesday's one, that is the one that we're going to do later today at about 1 o'clock in South African Standard Time. So that will then run from 1 to 3. I didn't see any names that are familiar necessary, but I thought I'd just point that out just in case someone does join on the wrong link. So if you want to rather register for the one this afternoon, that is also in the same email advert that you received for this session now. And then at the same time, obviously, if you have joined us today, you are attending session 1 and you want to attend session 2 as well. Session 2 for today's session, if you prefer a morning session, is scheduled for this coming Tuesday, same time as this session. But if you would prefer to just do both sessions in one day, get it out of the way, and also see everything in one day, you are most welcome to join the session also later today at 1 o'clock South African Standard Time. So what we've done is, because some of you may already know, you need a day for some of the tasks to run. So that's why we've also scheduled the sessions a bit out of, just a bit removed from each other to give the system time to automatically run those scheduled tasks so that I can show you how the system has in fact done that. All right, so to confirm then, this is the first of 2 sessions. And I will shortly also tell you what we're going to do in this session as opposed to the other sessions. Let's just start by me introducing myself to all of you. I may be familiar to some of you, but if I'm not, my name is Juané Schreuder. I'm an independent consultant to Caseware Africa, and specifically the content owner for SQM. What that basically means is that I've helped to create a lot of the content in the libraries. So I've helped to write a lot of the risks, the policies, procedures, monitoring activities. But then I've also helped as part of a team to decide and to give the programmers guidance as to what the tool must be able to do. So what is the app? What must it do? What functionalities do we want, etc. And we continue to add to that as we go along. So welcome also from myself then to today's session. Then just some admin for today's session. All attendees are muted and your cameras have been turned off. But I will show you shortly also where you can submit questions in the chat box. If your signal is lost, you can just exit the webinar and just join again. If there are any of you on the app, on the web browser, I see there's maybe one person on the web browser. You may want to rather follow on the app itself and not on the web browser. So what that basically means is you would have downloaded something rather than be on an actual internet or web browser at the moment. So the app does seem to be a little bit more stable than the web browser. We are recording this session and the recording will be made available afterwards. So if for some reason you need to rush off to some emergency or a client calls you, I know those also happen, or otherwise if your connection is really poor, the recording will be made available and you will be able to then watch that recording later on. Then just the admin in terms of the question chat panel. The image on the slide that you're currently seeing shows you what the chat part looks like on your dashboard. So if you are using the app and you are looking at this dashboard, the first off at the top there's an audio little part, but the second part of the dashboard is the questions chat function, and that is where you can then add your questions, submit your questions or comments or anything that you need to communicate to me so that I can see if there are any problems. Right, so that's just in terms of how to communicate with me, how to give me feedback. Before we start with that, just for the sake of the bandwidth, I'm going to actually switch off my camera so that you can rather focus on what I'm trying to show you in the screen. And then at the same time, I'm going to kick us off with a poll just to see what we are dealing with, who is our audience today, and what is your role. So my first question that I've asked you is, what role do you play in your firm's system of quality management? Are you just a normal staff member? Are you the person ultimately responsible for the firm's system of quality management, the firm's compliance with ISQM 1? Are you operationally responsible? In other words, you are help with the design of the system, and that's why you are joining today's today's webinar. Or are you going to help with the monitoring? Maybe you're going to do all of them, then rather just pick the one that is primarily your role, so that you can see how, or so that I can also just see what roles you are playing. We've only got about 50% of delegates voted, so can I please ask you to give me an answer to respond, so that I can just get a good idea of who we have on the call today. Right, we're at about 60%. Please give me your responses so that we can just see who we have in the call today. Right, I see we've got about 70% now, so I'll give another few seconds and then close the poll. So if you still wanted to contribute, do so now, please. Okay, let's close that poll, and then I will share the results with you. So what we can see is that we have about 23% of today's delegates are normal members of staff. So that's fantastic. So you're going to see how everything comes together, so that when you see what you are seeing on SQM, then you can see how did it come to there. So you'll have the background from that perspective. Then we've got a third, 31% of the individuals attending today's session are the persons ultimately responsible. So I almost want to say a special welcome to you, because you have a major responsibility on your shoulders, and I'm really hoping that today's session is going to clarify a few matters for you. We then also have 38% of the persons being operationally responsible, helping to design the firm's system of quality management. You have a lot of work on your shoulders, so we are going to help you to see how best to set up your firm's system of quality management. And then we also have 8% of individuals who are involved with the monitoring, which is great, because then you can also see how the firm's supposed to design the system, so that when you are monitoring if this was done appropriately, you get that idea, or you know what to look for. All right, so let's have a look then at polling question 2. Polling question 2, I want to know, how far have you progressed on SQM? In other words, how far have you progressed on setting up your system of quality management in SQM, in the app? So nothing at all, and that's perfectly fine. In the previous session, I also said I'm not going to check your answer. I'm not the regulator or anything, so please, if you really haven't done anything, you're most welcome to also indicate that. You've started the design, but you haven't completed it. Sometimes people get stuck somewhere and then they just need some guidance. You've designed and published, but you haven't done the monitoring yet. So you're already using the system, but you haven't completed the, let's say, the latter parts. You've completed the monitoring, but not the evaluation. Or maybe you've already gone full circle and you've completed even your first evaluation. Please give me an indication as to where your firm is with your system. We only have about 40% of users who have voted yet, so I definitely still want to get some input as to where you are in your firm's system of quality management. Knowing that there's been a few that are just normal staff members, you might not necessarily know. I guess the question is, if you go into SQM, well, firstly, have you logged into SQM? And if you have logged into SQM, could you see the firm's system of quality management, the policies and procedures? If that's there, then you would at least pick the designed, or further on, if you haven't done anything yet, then you would know there is absolutely nothing yet. Right, we've got about 50% voted. Just going to give a few more seconds to those delegates that still want to give me an indication. But what I can clearly see is that we haven't got any users today who have already completed the full circle, who have already completed the first evaluation, which is very interesting. I'm just saying interesting because I had at least one firm in the previous session who had already completed their first evaluation, which of course from a South African perspective depends on your regulator, but in a South African perspective you should have already completed your first evaluation in the December last year, December 2024. Of course that doesn't mean you didn't do it, it just means that you haven't done it on SQM. So we are coming up for our second evaluation at the end of this year. Sorry, I was saying 2024, 2023. So the second one would probably be at the very latest, 15 December 2024. If we look at the results there, and quite a big number, 40% has not done anything at all on SQM. So let me just make that very clear. 20% have started the design but not completed, so not published. Your system is not in operation on SQM yet. Then we've got 30% who are already working in SQM, so it's operational but not monitored, and 10% have done the monitoring but not the evaluation yet. So thank you very, very much for your contribution in this regard so that I could get an indication of where we are. All right, so what are we going to do today? I thought of starting off with a little SQM circle to show you what the process is for SQM. And so when we start setting up SQM, we start in settings, which I guess is not too surprising, but we will start in settings and I'll also show those to you. And then from there, we will move to the design of the firm's system of quality management. Now, in today's session, this 2-hour session, we will only be working in these two elements. So settings and then design. You are going to see design is quite an intensive time-consuming process, but it is critical to your system's operation. So it's important to get that right. Then in the next session, we are going to move towards operate. What does the app show you? How does it work? How do you complete tasks in the operate mode? We're going to look at operate overview, monitor, as well as evaluation. So we will do the remainder of the app in the second session. Not because it's less important at all, but just because the design of your system takes up quite a lot of time. And so we have then specifically identified some time in today's session to make sure that we cover that satisfactorily. All right, good. So let's move on then to the system. We jump straight into the system and see what do we have there. Where do we start? Right. So if I was obviously on another page. When I log into SQM, this one you will see is my blank system, and it's intentionally blank because we are going to start our design of the system today. So when I log into my system, this is what I will see. So it is designed to automatically or by default land on your operate page, and because that is where the bulk of your users will normally see it as well. So in there, they will be able to see and do what they need to do. But this is not where we start when we set up our firm's SoQM. Yes, design would be where we are going to go. That is the first module. But even before the design module, you'll remember now from the slides, we first had to go to settings. So settings I will get when I go to the little burger menu right at the bottom, settings. And then also you will see the staff and the groups. That's also where we're going to work just now. So that's the burger menu. Settings, if you click settings, you will get a variety of setting options. And in SQM, you will have a few options. The first one being import. I'm not going to spend too much time today on import, but just to let you know, this is where if you are a network or part of a network of firms and your main network firm has set up specific network required policies, procedures, etc., those ones will be imported through this functionality. So you don't need to then go and record them individually. You can actually import them here. The file format is called an SQMX format. It looks like Excel, but it's not Excel. So if your network firm, for example, also uses SQM, they can export it. Otherwise, you can create or download a template from where you can then copy paste it in and import it in one go. So it's not necessary to go into too much detail if you have to import items from a network perspective. All right, so I'm also not going to spend too much detail about how to do that, but just so you know, the functionality is there. You also have the option, if there are only one or two of those items, for the objectives and each of the individual activities, to manually add items through the add dialog. Right, what's important to know here is that any of the items that are imported either through the import functionality or any of the individual sub-items will be basically tagged as network required, whatever the item is, objective, risk, policy, etc. Right. Then the other setting in SQM here is the manage SQM setting. The first one being system reset. So let me just explain why we have system reset. What we found is that firms, when they first start off, they have a look at things. Well, you know, you are just human, so you might be making a little bit of a mistake when you set something up, etc. And because this is a system that needs to keep track of what's happening and history, you can't delete just anything. So sometimes you realize, oh, I made a mistake, I actually want to delete something. You can't delete something. Then it's going to either sit there forever and ever, or you maybe want to start from a clean slate. So then you have the option to reset your system, but this should not be done regularly. Of course, for me, in a training capacity, it's fantastic. I can reset it as often as I need to. But in your firm, where you need to have the records of your system operating properly, you are not going to reset just every now and again. So there are some controls built into how easy it is to reset, and there's authorization required, and it gets approved by certain people. So, but just so you know, there is this functionality and where it is situated. Then also, if you are using contacts as members to participate in your system of quality management, where you will be setting up their access, as we can see here, design, operate, monitor, and operate, overview, monitor, and evaluate. Those access rights will also be monitored or managed here in the SQM settings. We are going to show you, or we're going to physically set up the settings for the staff and the groups just now, but that will be very similar, only contents are managed in settings. All right, so that's settings, the basic settings. Then in terms of staff, I've got a few staff members allocated here, and if I just maybe pick myself, I've set myself as a partner to show you how that works. So here already you can see in the SQM app, the roles that have been allocated to me is firstly view and create. That's the default one, but I've also been allocated additional advanced roles. So where do we set that up? If I go to edit in my roles, in my user or staff setup, I can then go to apps, and if I scroll down, I can see that I've been allocated all of the roles. You will also note that this is grayed out slightly because I did not go and individually allocate each staff member's rights to their individual staff setup. You can do that, but it is quite time consuming. What I've rather done is I've actually allocated these rights from the partners group, and you can even see my mouse there also says inherited from group partners. So I'll show you just now in the groups where I've allocated rights to the partners, and that is what's basically reflected here. How does that benefit me? Well, if I have, let's say, groups set up for, let's say, trainees, managers, partners, if a person then gets promoted from trainee to manager, I just need to remember to move that person's grouping from trainee to manager, and I don't have to remember what does the additional roles and access rights and everything that this person requires, because that's already been set up for managers. I just say, oh, I see Juané is now being made a manager, let me move her to that group. All right, so this is quite beneficial if I use groups. Otherwise, not a problem. You can just individually come and mark these little blocks for your individual users. All right, how do I know that I've been allocated to groups? If I go to the group setup, you can see that I've been assigned the partners group. Right, if we then go from staff, not look at the staff, but at the groups, then under the groups, you will see that there's a few groups. I haven't set up too many groups, but we've definitely got partners, and that's where I'm going to go set up the rights for the partners to allocate them all of the roles. All right. We will see as we progress through each of these sections also as to who needs access to what, but you can see the default. If I switch on SQM, you will at least have your create functionality, which means a normal staff member will have access to the operate module to be able to create tasks, fill in the forms, like let's say, for example, complete the annual ethics declaration or the training register, etc. Right, the other ones, we'll talk through them as we go through each of the settings. Good, so that was settings and staff settings then. Right, so before we then go to our go and play in our system, I want us to just quickly go and consider the roles and responsibilities from the ISQM 1 standard. Now, the default ISQM 1 standard has basically allocated a minimum of 2 roles. We've provided for 4 roles, which are mentioned in the standard. The minimum roles are, firstly, the person or persons that have ultimate responsibility and accountability for the system of quality management. You can see from the standard, this is the person that is either the CEO or the managing board of partners, and who has to evaluate and conclude whether the firm's system of quality management achieves the objectives of ISQM 1. All right, so ISQM 1 is the standard that primarily drives the requirements for SQM. Yes, we also have ISQM 2. ISQM 2 is the one which deals with quality management, engagement quality reviews, but ISQM 1 was the one that required a firm system of quality management. Then operationally responsible person, that is then a person or persons again who are responsible for the design of the firm system of quality management and the implementation thereof, and then of course also to make sure that it is operating. The standard then says you can also allocate additional specific responsibilities, such as examples given then is for independent requirements and for monitoring and remediation process. You could also allocate other roles. What we've done in SQM is to at least allocate or give you the functionality to allocate these 4 roles. Good, then, let me just go back to my slides. The user personas that you'd expect to find in your firm is firstly the UR, the ultimate responsible person. So you will identify them on SQM as a person called UR or a role UR, which is then mostly your CEO, maybe your managing partner. It can be more than one person. So if you've got a managing board of partners, that's also possible to then basically just link all of those. Then next up is your OR, or your person with operational responsibility. Operational responsibility would then be a partner or manager, possibly, not a requirement, but possibly in a technical or quality department, who is then going to set up the design and the implementation of SQM. And then if you allocate those, well, we have to allocate them, I will show you just now, but they don't need to be allocated to unique individuals, but they will then also, the operational responsibility for independence, probably allocated to a partner or manager, and the same then for someone doing the monitoring and remediation. If I say doing, that's basically the person taking responsibility for the performance of the monitoring and remediation. So what I have seen is that when a firm sets up their system initially, sometimes they'll allocate that to a partner. What you will find though is down the line when the actual monitoring and remediation has to happen, that partner is probably not going to do all the legwork. And so you may need to go and add or allocate additional persons to that MON responsibility, possibly being an external consultant who's going to do the monitoring for you. Or if you then use one of your technical managers or whoever it is, but that person will then be allocated the MON role as well. So it's possible again to allocate more than one person. If you want to say partner X is taking ultimate responsibility for the monitoring, great, have him or her on there. But you may also need to add more individuals who are going to do the legwork. And then all your other users are just going to be, most want to say, normal users of Caseware. And in the settings part, you would have seen where we then just allocate them as create and view. So they won't be allocated the additional modules. All right. So then let's go and have a look at how that is allocated in SQM. I just want to give a moment for the screen to change over. There we go. Right, so the first thing that I will do when designing my system of quality management is to basically tell the system which individuals have been given these responsibilities of UR, OR, MON, and IND. And that happens then in design and responsibilities. Just to confirm who should have access to design, this would normally not be your, let's call them general staff. This will be the individuals who have ultimate responsibility, who have the operational responsibility for designing. That person will, of course, have to do the bulk of the work here. And then what I've also found practically is the person being responsible for the monitoring and remediation will have to come and see how the system was set up, designed, etc. So they will also have access or need to have access to see what happened in design. So that's generally the individual. So normal staff members would generally not have access to design. In setting up those responsibilities, allocating them, we have this little table which currently is blank, but I will go and identify a person by saying add a person or add a responsibility. And then in this system, I've got a lot of users. I'm just going to allocate a person or allocate the roles to myself. If I am a sole proprietor, for example, I'm most welcome to allocate all of those to myself, or I can allocate some to others as well. All right, so I'm just for today's session going to allocate all of those responsibilities to myself. My partner, business partner, he or she is maybe responsible for other roles, or whatever the reason is, I'm going to allocate all of them to myself. If I've got an appointment letter, I can include the URL there, which, and this is a very, to me, a really useful feature, is any of these URLs that I include can either be to the cloud URL, so Caseware Cloud, it can be somewhere on Caseware Cloud, or it could also be to other URLs, such as a SharePoint link, for example. Right, so if I've already got the appointment letter for this person to say, you have the responsibility for system of quality management in terms of ISQM 1, and I've got that engagement letter that I want to link here, I can just include that URL. I'll click on save, and there you can see immediately that responsibility has been allocated to myself. It is important that before we move on, each of these 4 roles should have been allocated. So UR, OR, MON, and IND should have been allocated to a person. As you can see, it's fine if they're allocated to the same person, but I need to have someone taking responsibility for each of those 4. The persons then need to actually accept the responsibility for that. So this is something else that I've seen where people allocate it, but nobody actually signs off and says, yes, I agree. So you could have possibly allocated my name here, but I don't even know I've been allocated, and I haven't acknowledged that I accept the responsibility. So it's important that I accept my responsibility. When I click on this to accept the responsibility, there's like a little, just a summary to say, this is what you're not actually agreeing to. And I click on accept to sign off that I'm agreeing to those responsibilities. I can only sign off for myself. So if I had another person listed here, I could not actually sign off for that person. What I am able to do is I'm able to sign off the reviewed for myself in the case of being a sole proprietor or the only partner that makes sense that I need to sign off for myself. But also if I've allocated roles to other individuals, if I'm the ultimate responsible person, I need to be able to also sign off for myself. Then again, there's like a little responsibilities that I need to sign off. But firstly, it just tells me, hang on, are you going to review your own responsibilities? Is that what you want to do? And we say, yes, that's fine. And then my little, let's say, little acknowledgement to say, yes, I have checked that the person accepting this is the appropriate person to perform this role, and sign that off as reviewed. Once it's been reviewed, the status changes to review, and now it is in a position to be actually published when I do finally publish my system of quality management. Right, so you can have more than one person here. The important thing is to have all 4 roles allocated and accepted and reviewed before we publish. Good, that's responsibilities. Then in terms of setup, let's have a look at the setup. Setup has 3 parts. First of all, in setup, I need to make sure that I select the correct content. Basically, that's what's going to happen. But what I do is I indicate which standard is applicable to my firm. So the default one that the system ships with is International Standard on Quality Management, the one that was issued by the ISSB, and that is the American English. That's what the AE is for. There's been no specific localization done for it, so it's just the international standard. If I say, hang on, I don't want the American English, I actually want the British English, I will go and look for the British English. You can see we even have a French one that's just been translated to French, but not specifically localized. So also something to note here is I cannot untick something if that's the only language. So I need to, sorry, the only standard. So I need to first tick the one that I want there before I can untick the one that I no longer want. Right. You can tick more than one, which makes sense if you are setting it up for a network, for example, and you will tick all the ones that are relevant to your network and then distribute them to be used by all your individual network firms. Then I sign it off to say I have selected the right one and this is now ready to be used. It's really just to prevent anybody from changing it continuously, because then the content is literally going to change in your system. Next, we have quite a bit of work to do in this table. So what is this table about? This table is basically your risk matrix that you are going to use in doing your risk assessment when you are assessing the risks of possibly affecting the quality management. So when you say, I've got my quality objective, what could happen that will make our firm not comply with that objective? Well, this could go wrong, that could go wrong. And then we say, what is the possibility of this happening? And what would be the impact of this actually happening? What would be the impact on our quality management? Those are the two elements that we need to assess in terms of the standard. So the framework or the matrix that you have is firstly in terms of probabilities to pick rare, unlikely, possible, likely, very likely, the ones from left to right. And in terms of effects, you go from top to bottom: insignificant, minor, moderate, major, catastrophic. So then to say the combination of these two for our firm is going to be, in the case of unlikely and insignificant, the resulting risk will be very low, or low, medium, or high. So you've got all those options. Now the default one again is reflected here. You are welcome to change it as you need to. What is necessary as an additional action, though, is that your firm should, as we've included there at the top, just above that matrix, it really is recommended that the firm develops a common set of assessment criteria, which will help the individuals doing the risk assessment to consistently come to the same conclusion. So basically to say that when I'm looking at a risk and I'm deciding on when will it be possible versus likely probability, or when will it be major versus catastrophic effect, that I will pick the same ones as what you or the next colleague would pick if we all perform the assessment objectively and, well, individually. That's really just to say that, or to ensure we get a consistent risk result. Okay, that's the first part, this matrix, this table. But then next up is to say, once you've now got your risk result, we know there's very low, low, medium, high risk. What then? What is your response going to be? Now, first of all, to note, the standard says that not every risk is going to be a quality risk, and you only have to respond to a quality risk. So this here is basically we're going to say, at what point do I need to respond? So you can see that we said when a risk is very low, you will need no response, because we're going to say basically that is so small, it's not a quality risk. You don't actually need a policy or procedure to address that. What we've done here for low is we've suggested that you can possibly have one that says, well, in these instances, the person will have to apply their judgment to decide what type of response is necessary. Whether that response would be none, yes, okay, it's kind of on the in between not being a risk and being a risk. So sometimes we're going to pick none, sometimes we're going to pick moderate or response. Or are we going to actually say, no, you know what, when it's low, we're always going to make it none. So this is where your firm is going to either apply judgment in that individual circumstance, or if you don't like that, you can actually remove it out and pick one of the other options. For today's purpose, I'm going to keep it there so that you can see the impact when I do my risk assessment. Medium requires a moderate response. High risk requires a significant response. And then the last part in the setup is when I need to do a system reset. This is where one would go and select or request the system reset, which will then be approved where we were earlier on under settings. Right. What is also critical to know is that the risk assessment must be signed off before you can do any risk assessment. In fact, you will have a warning message on the risk assessment side if you have not yet signed off your risk assessment matrix. So I'm going to sign it off just so you know I have not made any changes to the default matrix, but please, you are most welcome to make those changes as you see fit for your firm. Right, next up then we have understanding. Now before we go to understanding, let's just have a look at the slides again, and I want us to actually just quickly just have a look at what the quality management risk assessment requires. So the risk assessment process requires the firm to really go through a process of understanding itself. So think about your own firm, that's basically what it says, and then think about where things can go wrong, where are the risks, and how can you actually address those. So in SQM, I just made this little summary of how do we deal with this in SQM. So we firstly started with the settings and the setup to give users access, allocated responsibilities in the setup of SQM, our risk assessment matrix just now. Next, we need to document our understanding of our firm. And important here is not just to document it once and it never, ever, ever changes. Anytime something changes in your firm, maybe you employ more staff, maybe you appoint another partner, maybe you take on a new type of service that you're going to offer your clients, anything like that could affect your understanding of the firm and the resulting, the resulting possible risks to quality. Right, that's the important part here. And then from that understanding, we are going to go and work through the risk assessment process to ultimately design our system. The third little bubble there does show us a little bit more about that, but let me just show you here the FRAP one: objectives, risks, policies, procedures, tasks, and monitoring activities. I'm going to show you one just now as well. But then once we've designed those, then we will publish our firm system. So basically roll it out, implement it if you want, and then the firm will operate that system. So the policies will be complied with, the procedures will be executed, etc. And then every now and again, we will perform the monitoring. Now that's where we then get to the second session of our training, is to say, how do we then actually get to the monitoring? And that's where we will have designing of monitoring activities and a bunch of things there, okay? How often do I, or how do I change my firm system of quality management? I've mentioned now we need to update our understanding. There may be new risks every now and again. There may be new responses, or we may identify that there are better ways to do things. So just to record improved responses or to improve the processes of the firm. And then ultimately in the FRAP or firm's risk assessment process, we need to evaluate whether the firm is in fact achieving the objective of ISQM 1. All right, so that's just the high level run through. Now, in terms of the risk assessment process and the objectives, etc., I wanted to show you this slide. So what is important in SQM specifically, but it also comes from the standard, is that we link the individual items consistently. There's always this golden thread going from start to finish. So I almost want to say, if you haven't made a note and you want to make a note for yourself, this thing is really critical in how we set up the document or the system. Every objective will have linked risks. Now, many is a term that may also be of interest to you or important for you to note, is that a few objectives may link to one risk, or there may be many risks that link back to the same objective. So just because I've got one line here doesn't mean that it couldn't be any other way. So for every objective, you need to go and have a linked risk or more than one linked risk. And every risk needs at least one policy response. And every policy response then requires a procedure response. Okay, this is an SQM requirement that you need both of them. ISQM 1 does not require that, but I'll explain why we've got those both of them in there. And then we have a task in SQM, and ultimately to help the person doing the monitoring, we have a monitoring activity that links to either or all of these items to say, every now and again, we will go and check that the task is being performed, that the procedure is actioned, that the policy is complied with, etc. So there's always a monitoring activity linking to all of those items. Now, we spoke about policy response, procedure response, and task. Let's just see what is the difference between these. So a policy response in terms of the standard is defined as the firm's statement or statements of how they will perform or respond to the assessed risks. So how will you respond? We have a policy to say all engagements must be archived within a certain number of days. We have a policy to say that we don't just take on any clients, we first consider X, Y, Z, and the other thing, and so forth. So your policy response is how do you respond to your quality risks? The procedure response is defined in ISQM 1 as specifying the firm's actions required in order to implement the firm's policy responses, which tells me then that I cannot actually have a procedure response if I don't have a policy, because how are you going to respond to a policy if there's no policy? Okay, but that's my interpretation. And in terms of also, I'm going to say making the programming work, it's not as simple as that. We always require, as we said, we always require a policy, then a procedure, then a task. All right. So that's why you can basically draw those little arrows for yourself between each of them. You cannot link a task directly to a policy. You first need to link it to a procedure and then to a policy response. Good. So that was then the policy and the procedure. Now, what is a task? A task is an SQM specific item. So you won't find the word task in ISQM 1 necessarily. It is an app specific matter. Now, a task in SQM is the documentary evidence that the actions, the procedures that were required to implement the firm's policy were performed. So this would be where you are going to complete something in the firm's independence register, in the consultation register, if you need to fill in a form to say that you have archived the file timelessly, any of those documentary evidence items can be performed in the form of a task on SQM. It is not critical that they have to be done. You can still use your own registers outside of SQM, but with the automation and the scheduling, you will see the benefit of having those tasks in SQM itself. All right, so let's go and see what is the focus then for today before we jump into the SQM system again. So for today, and you would have seen that also from the advert, we are going to look at two specific actions, procedure responses, and how to set up to ultimately get to those. First of all, we're going to have the independent declaration management, the independent annual declaration that needs to be done. Those will be automated or scheduled by Caseware Cloud. And then that will be allocated. We will have two of them. The first one is to allocate them to all your current staff. So you would probably have once a year, the let's say on the 1st of February, all our staff complete our annual independence declaration. That happens. But then the 1st of June, you have a new audit manager starting. Do you remember to also then let that new audit manager complete the annual declaration, or does that person only complete it next year, February? Now, ideally, that person should be completing it when they are taken on to make sure that there aren't any independent issues between now, 1 June, and the 1st of Feb when we do our next schedule. So we are going to then also just schedule another task to say when a new staff is added after the 1st of February, so any other time, we will also let them perform the annual independence declaration. So we will either schedule something that will happen on the 1st of Feb, or then also when there is a cloud activity, and in our case today, when a new staff member is added. And then we will perform or also set up the training attendance register. So this one is basically to say we're not going to have paper flying around the training room anymore. Every time you are attending a training session, you need to complete a piece of paper to say you were at the training. You are going to go do it on SQM to indicate what training you have completed. And that's because I can't anticipate in setting up my system how often you're going to attend the training. You will have to create those records manually. All right, so I'm going to show you how to do that. And of course, we can also then create those repeatedly every single time I complete the training or a new item or new session of training. Right, so let's go and have a look now at SQM itself and see how are we going to do that. So we started off earlier by saying we are looking at the understanding system of quality management or understanding the firm. The questions in this section has been taken from the standard. So not all of them, there are a few where we added a few extra ones, but I just wanted to indicate that I didn't necessarily think up all of them because I thought you might want to have some additional documentation, not at all. A lot of these, or most of these, are actually required by the standard to say the firm should obtain an understanding of the following, and then from there. All right. How do you complete this document? Well, first of all, there are some questions with open-ended space where you can then type and type and type as much as you need to. And if you need to add more content, you can see that the field simply increases in size as you need to add additional content. There are also simple questions that just simply has a yes or no. That's quite nice and easy to respond to. And there are also, let's say this one, for example, that says, how many offices does your firm have? And you can simply use the up and down arrows to indicate 1, 5, how many ever there are. You have the option to add annotation, so either a little note to document something there, or to actually include a link to a document somewhere. So maybe I'm completing specific questions here after we had minutes discussing what to complete, or we have I don't know, the website or something like that where I want to actually include the link here. I can simply include that URL there, and I'm actually just going to quickly just say caseware.com/CQS, and then the rest should work like that. Okay. So there you can see I've included a little hyperlink. That one's now not really going to work, but we can at least see what it's going to look like. Ideally, I should be signing off each of these items once I've completed them. It's really just best case and to say who actually completed it so that we can know, but it's not going to stop you from going ahead if you haven't signed them off. We have a little headers of specific topics then, so you can just open each of them and complete the questions as necessary. Right at the bottom, we then have a conclusion part. What is the purpose of the conclusion part? So it's not to say, yes, when Juané completed these questions, she got all the answers right. Okay, that's not the purpose. This is really to say that it's almost like your completeness check for your objectives and your risks. So why does ISQM 1 want you to understand your firm? Well, it's really to be able to see what quality objectives you should have and where there are risks to potentially complying with your quality objectives. So sitting back from having answered all of these questions, having designed or identified your objectives and risks, which is still to come, you can then come back here and say, well, I've looked at the information we've documented here and I'm comfortable. I've reviewed and agreed that all objectives and all risks are complete. And that's really what you're getting to. So you'd probably only come back to this conclusion after you've recorded your objectives and your risks, which are really the next two parts that we're going to do. All right. So once you've done that, you're welcome to obviously document a little note there and then to agree and sign off. And it's just going to indicate that I have indeed signed off the section. Who has to sign this off? Well, at some point we thought it should be the person with ultimate responsibility to sign this off, but we're not limiting it to that. So it could also be the OR, the person being operationally responsible, to say, well, I've documented my understanding, I've recorded the objectives and risks, and I'm comfortable that I have indeed recorded all the objectives and risks, taking the understanding into account. All right. A reminder again, this information is not now cast in stone and may never change. As your firm changes, please come and update your understanding. I would recommend best process would be to come and update it at least once a year to make sure that your stuff is current. Good. Now the hard work starts. Next, we're going to look at objectives. Now, the objectives are basically saying these are little the little elements that is in ISQM1 to say that in order to achieve the objective, the big objective of ISQM1, we believe that you need to keep the following quality objectives in mind for your firm. So these are all prescribed by the standard, and that is why you already have them in the table, and that are, in terms of the type, that are highlighted as mandatory objectives. So you have the mandatory ones listed there. In fact, when we look at the library later on, you will see that I don't have any library items in my library. So this would be where we're going to add additional items by using that little plus sign. And if I click on objective, I can add an additional objective. But where we will, for others, have a library button here where I can open up a library, we didn't provide a library for objectives. Why not? Well, the reason is really just that while some people may identify additional objectives for their systems, every single time someone has mentioned a specific objective to me, I've been able to actually link them to the quality objectives that are already included in ISQM1. So I do believe that any risk that you're going to identify will actually fit into these standard default mandatory objectives. That doesn't mean you're not allowed to record any additional objectives. Please, by all means, feel free to add additional objectives if there are specifics to your firm. I just don't believe we need to record any additional ones. All right, how do I complete any of these objectives? I've got a few specific ones that I want us to look at today. So I'm going to start, first of all, with the specific ones that's going to link to the annual ethics declaration and then the training attendance register. The way that I would recommend you go about them is literally just start with the first one that's listed, work through it, and sign it off if you are happy with it. All right, so it's really no critical thing, but because I want us to publish a teeny tiny system by the end of today, I'm only going to focus on the ones that I know are directly linked to our two tasks. So what I'm going to do in terms of our component, I'm actually going to filter our component to say I'm only interested in the relevant ethical requirement ones, or I could have also just, in terms of the ID, typed in RER, because I know that is the code for relevant ethical requirements. So these ones are now the ones that I'm seeing. And if I think about the annual ethics declaration, the question there is for MOR 1.2 to say the firm and its personnel fulfill their responsibilities in relation to the ethical requirements to which the firm and its engagements are subject. So we know that the firm, the staff, do not have any ethical conflict. How do we know that? Well, that's what we want to know. How will we know that? Well, ultimately, we'll get that annual ethics declaration. So this will be the relevant objective there. It is ready to be signed off because I can see that little circle there. But because I'm going to first read it, I'm not just going to sign it off. So you can also read it here in the little table, or you can actually open up the dialogue. So I'm going to click on that pen and then open the dialogue, which is like the card, if you want, that shows what has been recorded. So this is a mandatory item. That's the type, because it's prescribed by the standard, and all mandatory items have very limited capacity for you to change elements for. So the title, the ID, those things will stay there. What you do have an option is to say whether this is relevant to your firm or not, and this will be the same for all dialogues. So if this objective or mandatory policy or something like that is really not relevant to your firm, maybe because you're just one person and you don't have staff, or whatever the reasons may be, then you are most welcome to then indicate that it's not relevant to your firm. Simply click no, but then you will have to document why this is not relevant to your firm. And that will be the end. That will be all you're going to do for this mandatory item. In this case, objective or the mandatory policy or procedure, just to indicate why you don't have that in your system. But in other cases where they are relevant, you're going to click remain or retain the yes and follow the rest of the fields through. So you could have additional documentation in your additional description field. In all mandatory items, you'll have additional spaces. You can select the actual standard that's relevant to your items. Maybe just a thought on here already. If you only have one standard, like we've only picked the ISQM 1 BRE one, you don't have to select the standard every single time. This one is, of course, prescribed. So even from the content, we've indicated to you the authoritative reference with the standard. But when you are setting up ones from your library or your own firm ones, you don't have to, if that's going to save you some clicks, and it will save you some clicks, if you've only got one standard, you don't have to indicate the applicable standard each time. The one that you selected will be the default one in each instance. All right, we've given you space for sub-objectives if you want to. Again, you can link additional documents or what is the word that I'm looking for now? Any notes from meetings, etc. You can include those as well. I'm going to come back to linked risks just now. You've got some more space for note and then the effective to and from, and then you can sign off or save. What is the linked risks? Now, I don't have any data to display here. Why is that? Because I haven't recorded any risks in my system. Now, remember from our slides, we had the objective, arrow, risk, arrow, policy, arrow, procedure. So what this would be, or would be possible for, is if I'd already recorded the relevant risk relevant to this objective, I could have selected it from a drop-down menu here. But I haven't recorded any risk yet, so there literally is nothing to link. The good news is that when I get to the risk, I can actually link it back to the objective. All right. So don't worry about this. If there's no data to display, I will just link it later on, and we will also check that we're not missing anything. The effective from and effective to dates, just to understand the principle of those, and this is again consistent throughout the product. If I'm designing my system right now, and the moment I publish, it's going to be effective, then I don't have to really complete the effective from or to. In fact, you can just leave it blank, and it'll be effective immediately when you publish. But if I am now, let's say, a year or 2 or 3 down the line, and I want to improve one of my policies, for example, and I want to say this specific policy is only effective until the end of August 2024, and then I will have a new policy effective from the 1st of September 2024. I can then have 2 separate policies recorded, or in this case it's now an objective, 2 separate ones recorded, and then indicate basically the sunset date, up to what date will the one be relevant, and from what date will the next one be effective. And I can publish both of those ahead of time. That helps me that I don't have to wake up in the middle of the night on the 1st of September to remember, oh, I need to switch off that one and switch on this one. No, it's not necessary. I've published them ahead of time. The system will then automatically hide the one that's no longer available or no longer relevant, and only the new one will be relevant and reflected. Otherwise, the new one will be there, indicating that it's only effective from a new or future date. So again, I can inform my staff ahead of time, but they'll also know that I only have to comply with the relevant task, not the other one as well. All right, so those are very consistent policies and principles in the dialogues throughout the product. Good, so we haven't linked any risks, there aren't any, but I can now sign off prepared by. And that means I've then signed off and confirmed that this one objective is ready for use. If I now collapse that card, you can see there it's been signed off. That's good. Okay, let's just quickly find the other 2 as well. Apologies. So for our training attendance, we're going to have 2 objectives linked to that one, just so that you can see the principle. The first one that I want to link is to say the firm and its personnel understand the relevant ethics. So we're going to say we're going to have training regularly to help training, the staff understand what the relevant ethical requirements are. So that's also one of my relevant objectives for today. I'm going to sign that one off. And then also now I just need to filter the other components. If I show everything, I've got a lot of objectives again. You can scroll up and down if you want to, or in the ID, I'm going to actually filter HR, which I know is some of my objectives. That's the staff related objectives. And I'm going to go for HR2 that says personnel demonstrate a commitment to quality through their actions and behaviors, and they are actually improving themselves. So that's your training related objective. So I'm going to prepare that one as well, sign it off. Good. So we've now prepared or signed off 3 objectives. remember that you have to work through all of them. And also maybe just to note that where you had marked one not relevant, this little tick mark in the first column would not appear. Okay, and you won't be able to sign that off at all. Good, so let me go show you when we go to review and publish where my draft system of quality management is. You can clearly see there that my 3 signed off, only my signed off objectives are reflected there. They tell me it's objectives, but I've got errors here. The error then clearly indicates to me that you still need a link to risk. You can't just have objectives, you need you need risks also. So we know that, of course, we didn't think we were done yet, but just to show you that as you are signing off the content, it is being built in your draft system of quality management. To confirm, nothing has been published yet. So my operate, where the rest of my staff will go and look for this, is still completely blank. I'm only busy with my draft system of quality management. Okay, back to design. We've done the objectives. Next, we are going to look at the risks. Now, remember with objectives, we said there are only mandatory objectives. You can add additional firm ones, but there's no library. With risks, it's the opposite. The standard does not prescribe any risks. So we have no mandatory risks, but I have to go and create my own. We go to the little add button at the top. We say add a risk, and we are now going to go and find risks. I can create my own ones here and fill in the whole field, or I can use the library. I was talking to another practitioner yesterday, and my suggestion to them was very similar to what I'm going to say to you, and that is to use the library, but don't start from the first one and scroll all the way down and record each and every one of them. What I would rather recommend is to choose one objective and review the objective, look at what risks have been linked to that objective to then see that you covered that objective satisfactorily. So for example, we've got RER 1.1, which is the one related to our training one. And there we said we've got risk 17. I can see there's one, risk 17. There's one that says not understanding ethical requirements, risk 21. There's another one, 23, identify, and so forth. So I go through all of these, and I've then identified that risk 21 saying that the firm and its personnel do not understand the relevant ethical requirements is a risk. And we would record that or address that risk through training. And I would want the staff to record that they had attended that training. So this risk 21 is then going to be one of the risks that I'm going to record. So let's click that risk. What is maybe important now? Remember when we looked at the objectives, we said there's no risk yet to record. So what we need to remember is to actually link the objective here. So the objective that we just used was RER 1.1 that we had just signed off. So that's my linked objective. And you will see now that the fact that this field is completed is going to actually make my draft system link these two records. I've got the title there. Because it's not a mandatory item, I can change the title. I could change the ID. The firm type is because we are choosing to add it. And then you can change the risk that you want to record, the type of risk or the wording of the risk. There's additional description. I could pick the relevant or applicable standard. Remember, it is going to pick my one by default. I could add links as we had before, but this here is now my important parts. The parts that says risk assessment, probability of occurrence, and effect of achievement. Maybe just something else to mention also at this stage. You will notice that I can save this card already. That is because I've already completed all the fields with red asterisks. If I roll up or scroll up a little bit, you can see I've completed all the red asterisks. All the fields with red asterisks have been completed. Those are the ones that are required to save an item, whether it's a risk or a policy or whatever it is. I can save it, but I cannot sign it off as prepared by. On the left-hand side, you'll see that block is still blank because I haven't completed all the items with a blue asterisk yet, like my risk assessment. All right, using the risk matrix that's been programmed in, we are now going to go and say the probability of this occurring is going to be, and we use our firm criteria and we say it's possible that staff is not going to understand the ethical impact. And from an effect of achievement, it's going to be, oh goodness, let me pick the right one, moderate. The system then tells me, based on your risk matrix, your result is, your risk assessment result is a medium risk, which means it is a quality risk, and you require a response, a moderate response. So when you design your response, bear in mind when it is something that's moderate or significant, you might want to pick more items, less items, make it more cumbersome, not so cumbersome, whatever. Okay. And now next up, we need to document, and we've provided you with some content there to say document how and the degree to which conditions, events, circumstances, actions, or inactions affected your assessment of the probability of occurrence and the effect of achievement on achievement of the objective. So basically saying, why did you pick possible and not any of the others? And why did you pick moderate and not any of the others? Right, so that's what you need to document there. I'm just going to say document. And then move on. There's the space for note if you want to have any additional documentation. You could then link a policy. Well, the policies are already appearing here, but because we haven't recorded any policies, I don't know which one to pick, so I'm not going to select anyone right now. And then I've got my effective from and to dates again. I'm not going to pick any. We're just going to go through. At the moment, I have completed all of my blue asterisks, so it doesn't show me the sign off, but let me go and click on save, and I'll probably be able to sign it off there. Yes, right. So we've got risk 21 recorded, and that was linked to objective RE 1.1. Let me just show you what that looks like there now. You can see I've got the, just want to wait for the screen to change over. There we go. It looks like it's synchronized mostly. You can see my initial 3 objectives, and then for that middle one, I now have a risk recorded, and it's also indicated as a type. I still have a warning there though, and that one says, hang on, you can't just leave a risk hanging. You need a linked policy to that risk. All right, we're going to do the policies, but let's go and finish the risks first. So you can see it's really building. It's really, really, really helpful. Okay, we need 2 more risks here. The next risk I'm going to record is going to be for, where are we now? For the objective of RER 1.2. We're going to filter for that. And I want to go and look specifically for the one that talks about the annual ethics declaration. Risk 28. 18, 19, there we go to risk 20. To risk 28, and I just know this because I've obviously worked through it already, but as you read through them, you'll see the relevant ones. So staff being non-compliant with the ethical requirements. We want to select this risk to say, hang on, we need to make sure that staff is not non-compliant. Again, remember to link your linked objective here. I'm just going to link then RER 1.2. BRE is just indicating that it is specifically the British English one, in case you were wondering. Sorry, just give me a second. Apologies, just had to take a quick sip of water. Right, so we've indicated the objective there. And everything else is completed already. All the red is asterisks. I have to, however, come and do the risk assessment. Probability of occurrence, we consider our firm criteria and we say possible. And for the effect, we consider our risk criteria or our firm's criteria and we say minor for whatever reason. What do you notice now? Look at this. The risk assessment result based on our matrix is low. What did we say when our risk assessment result is low? We said the response required is going to be apply judgment. So this is where we're going to have to now apply our judgment in this case. Before we go and document that part, first I'm going to document my reason for the risk rating. So I'm going to say, why did I pick possible? Why did I pick minor? All right, once I've done that, I need to go and address this judgment part and say, what is it? Is our response going to be none? So actually, this is not a quality risk. Or is our response going to be moderate or significant? Let's pick moderate and say, we need to respond to this. We know we need to respond to this. Of course, if your common sense now kicks in and you say, but hang on, this doesn't sound right, then maybe you've picked the wrong criteria or the wrong effect and probability, and you need to go and change those at the top. But that is why a set of assessment criteria to help you to choose between those 5 options for effect and the 5 options for probability. That's why they are important, so that you can consistently pick the right options. All right, we've then done the judgment moderate. Now, why do you want a moderate response? That's what you're going to go and document there. Okay? You have space for notes. You can choose policy responses if you want, and you've got the effective dates. I'm going to sign off or save that one and sign it off. Okay, so now I've got 2 risks. I still have another risk, which I want to go and record. I know it's risk 67, so I just want to also just complete that one, the personnel competence. I want to ensure that personnel is competent, so we're going to give them training as a result of that. And there, the assessment, the objective is HR2. Okay, and I can know that again if I had included HR2 from the library and searched for it, and a variety of those, we would have found it. Again, the assessment, I'm going to have probability being possible, the effect on the achievement being moderate. I'm obviously taking a shortcut here. Hey? I'm choosing the middle option all the time, which is not very good, but that you'd go and apply your mind to this. I'm going to document why I picked something and then sign it off as prepared by. So what I can check now again is when I look at my draft system, I have a risk for each of the objectives. Okay. If I have a risk that does not, if I have an objective that does not have a risk, I need to just go back to my risks and see, have I identified a risk, even if I had recorded that risk to not require a response? So I have considered whether there are any risks that my objectives will not be met. I've maybe documented one and assessed it not to be a quality risk, therefore don't need a response. Okay. Those were the risks then. As a reminder, the risks, there's no mandatory risks. We only have the library, and that's why all my risks that you see today are firm. If I had imported ones from the network, well, those would have shown as network risks. Next then is the policy responses. So policy responses, there are some mandatory ones. What is that about? The standard paragraph, I think it's paragraph 34, if I remember correctly. I always get confused between 27 and 34. But one of the one of the paragraphs in the standard has specific responses required. You might remember ISQC1 had specific responses as well, but the majority of the standard was you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do this, you have to do that. This new standard obviously has the risk assessment process, but then says, given that you're going to follow the process, there are a minimum, and they're very few, number of items that you have to have at least a policy or a procedure for. So at least a policy or a procedure. Of course, you could have one or the other. Remember that in SQM, we've taken the principle of saying the policy is how you're going to actually respond to the risk. The procedure is the action you're going to take to implement the policy. So for each of those, the firm shall have at least a policy or a procedure. We have included a policy for each of those instances. Now, the first one that you may want to just have a look at is policy 129, for example, that we've seen here, which is the requirement for an independence declaration. So even ISQM 1 said the firm must at the very least have a policy for doing independence declarations to identify threats to ethical requirements. Okay, so that's the one that we're going to have, and we can even go in and sign that one off if you want. Linked risks there, the risk linked to that is a risk 28. You can also see it there, so we're just going to link that one. The threat is completed there. You can see the policy response. I cannot edit that because it is a required one. So you cannot edit the basic policy response. You do, however, have the additional space where you can document additionally. You have the applicable standard selected with the relevant paragraph, paragraph 34A there. You can include links to additional documents and so forth. And then already it is showing you the linked procedure responses. Okay, so they're already in there. We can know now then that we are going to have what the one we're going to look for is going to be procedure 10. 8, 9, and 10 is there. Well, I guess we're going to probably do number 8, but we can see when we get there which one is the most relevant one that says we need to actually do it. Why do we have 3? That's maybe another one. So when we design the procedures now, the hows, the actions, what needs to be done to comply with the policy. If you think about the declaration, there's a let's get everyone to complete the form. Let's check if everyone has completed the form and what is the information that was actually recorded in the form. What do we need to do to respond to that information? And each of those 3 things needed to be dealt with differently in the system. The one you can schedule, the one needs to happen by a more senior person, etc., etc. So that's why there are separate procedures and not just one, almost want to say all-encompassing one. All right, so we can prepare this policy response, we sign it off and we close, and that one's there. Another one, I just quickly want to see, I don't think policy 5 is included. Oh, policy 5 is included here. Annual declarations, also one of the mandatory ones. The firm requires all personnel to complete and submit an annual declaration. And we have a look at this and we see, yes, the firm requires all personnel, etc., etc., etc. Procedure, same procedure. So there's 2 policies, same procedures linked. Procedure 8, procedure 9, procedure 10. These other ones you can see is Spanish and all kinds of other languages, so don't worry about them, but they are the same. So let's make sure we sign this one off. So we signed off policy 5 and policy 29 in this case. That deals with the relevant ethics one. If you get confused and you think, what have I done now? Go to the review and publish one and you can see we've dealt with the ethical requirements and this annual declarations one is not linked. Oh my goodness, I forgot to do that one. Let's go fix it. Okay, you can immediately see, hang on, here's the problem. There's no risk linked to this objective, to this policy. What's happened? It's just in thin air. It can't just be in thin air. We need to go link it to a risk. So I'll click on that actual policy and go and link it to the risk of staff non-compliance with ethical requirements, because that's where I also have the policy of 129. So I need to link it to risk 28. So go to the policy. It's already been signed off. So I'll just remove the sign off. Go and simply record the risk there. It's in the drop-down menu already, so it's quite easy. That's all needed. And I'll sign it off. All done. And now it's moved up with the other risk. So you can see, you can literally come to your draft SoQM to see how you are progressing. All right, so we've done the policies there. Now we need the policies for the ethical requirements, understanding the ethical requirements and the personnel's competence. That's the one with regards to the training. So there we're going to go, there's no mandatory policy for that one. You could even have looked there if you wanted to, but we're going to go and say policy response. Let's go and search for one under the linked risks, and that is risk 21. Risk 21 and 67, which are my 2 risks that we recorded, is policy 34. So we will select policy 34. Just make sure you link that risk 21 and risk 67, so that we don't have to go back and fix it later, but you can. There's all the information. This is now not a mandatory one, which is why I can change the content. I can even change the policy if I want, add additional information, and I can go and save and sign off. Good. Now I want to see this, and I don't want to scroll. I don't know where to go look for it. What now? Okay. What I would simply do is I'll go and just filter using the type, filter, and then for the firm one that I've just recorded, and I can see there's that one. I've signed it off. It's ready to go. Right. Now we go back to our draft. I have now completed objectives, risks, and policies. Look at this. All my warnings are gone. Fantastic, eh? But I've got these little yellow things. What do they mean? Let me just show you. These are my warnings. So all my errors are gone. I've got a few warnings. And what does the warning say? It's each time with a policy where it says requires a prepared linked procedure. So it's telling you one of two things. Either you have already recorded your procedure, but you forgot to sign it off as prepared by. But you and I know we haven't done any procedures yet, right? Or we haven't done the procedure yet, and that's why it's not linked yet. So if you really wanted to, you didn't have any procedures, you could have gone and approved and published your system already. But obviously, it's not going to make any sense. So we still need to and want to go and develop our procedure responses and tasks. So off we go to procedure responses. Procedure responses, the actions we are going to take in this case. All right. So in terms of procedure responses, we know that there are requirements for annual declarations. So mandatory procedure 10 says the individual assigned with ultimate responsibility and accountability for the system of quality management will review the list of responses. That's the one about responses. Let's see if we've also got a procedure. Sorry, now I'm typing terribly. If we've also got a procedure 8 here. That was the other one. Remember, we had procedure 8, 9, and 10. Yes, there's a mandatory one that says you must make the declaration. So what do I see here? I cannot sign it off yet. See that red warnings, sorry, not warning, error. I can't sign this off yet. Why not? If I hover over it, it says you need to complete the nature field, the assignees field, and the groups field. All right, so let's go and open this card then. There's already information. I need to go and open this card and this dialogue and tell this procedure what's going to happen. So again, it's a mandatory one. I can't change the name. Can't change the procedure itself. I can provide additional information in the description to tell myself how this is going to happen when they read the manual. The standard's been ticked. You could link additional stuff if you want to. This is not where you link the actual form. I'm going to show you that. You could link the actual tasks. All right. Let me just quickly scroll up to the top. We've got the policies linked. Okay, thank goodness. All right. I could link the tasks, but again, there's no tasks yet. Now, what is it we need to complete? We still need to complete the nature. What does that mean? The standard says in developing your procedure responses, you have to consider the nature of your response, whether it is a preventative, like a control. Is it preventative, detective, or a combination thereof? Will you be using manual processes or technology? Do you require additional resources, etc.? So I'm just quickly going to say, we will use SQM task, okay? But what did I actually say there? I actually said, through the use of the SQM app, we're going to use the task functionality to perform the annual ethics declaration task or procedure, right? I don't need any additional resources. I've already got the technology, all good and well. Right, now, how is this task going to be created? This is our annual ethics declaration. We said we want to schedule this task so that it is done at a certain point in time. For us, for today, for this session, I'm going to schedule it to happen on Monday, right? It's Friday today. I'm going to let it happen on Monday. One, so that when my staff comes in on Monday, they can do it, but also because I wanted to reflect in our system before Tuesday when we have our next session. So I'm going to schedule it so that it's automatically done. The other two options, I'm going to show you separate tasks of those just now. So I'm going to schedule it. Firm personnel need to complete it, meaning all staff have to do it. And then I'm going to set the frequency. So it's been set to happen on the first day of every month. Please, you don't have to do that. Once a year is good enough. So I'm going to set it yearly on the 23rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 26th of August. Okay. I could also make it happen daily, weekly, monthly. There's a variety of options. I've just now selected a specific date. I'm going to click select frequency and go back to the task. It will be sent at about 10 in the morning on the 26th of August. All right. That's a scheduled task that will automatically happen. No human being is going to be involved there. The system will do it for us. Who's going to do it? All. Or if I wanted to do selection, I could say, well, just the audit staff or whatever the case may be. Okay. In terms of users, I could just select a specific user. Let me just specifically select Juané. Oh, now I can't even type my own name. That's a problem. Okay, I'm a member of staff, and I'm going to also select, let's not select all the staff. I rather want to make sure that I'm also selecting, goodness, sorry guys, I'm just, good. There we've got a user selected. Let me select the user. Trying to go too quickly. I'm going to do it slowly. Good. I can pick each and every user, or I can go to groups and pick the relevant group. So this platform now has a lot of groups. I'm going to choose partners. Okay. You and I would have picked all the SICA staff, all the firm staff. So there's also an all staff. Okay. I think I've got about 150 users on the system. So I'm not going to send something to all of them today, but in your system, you can set it all staff, audit staff, partners, whatever the case is. I'm just going to pick it for partners today. You can see I've selected a group. Okay. Then I can include additional note if I want, and effective from, etc. So the important parts was to schedule it, or to decide how often or how it will be done, the timing, and to assign it to individuals. All right. Then I can sign off this procedure and close it. The other one I want to do, and just for the sake of today, I'm going to just use another task. Actually, no, I don't need another procedure. We've already included in procedure 8. Let me just show you quickly in procedure 8. We've already included the fact, no, I'm confusing myself. Let's see this. I've got one procedure, one action that's going to happen on the at 10 o'clock on the 26th of August for all current people selected, which is all staff or partners, and I've selected myself, etc. Then I'm going to set up another procedure, a separate procedure. I'm just going to pick this one, but you can set up a duplicate of the same one. But for the sake of not having to complete a whole new dialogue, I'm going to just set up, let me rather show you. Quick create policy, not policy response. Quick create procedure response. A linked policy. What is our linked policy? Our linked policy is number 129 and number 5. I'm going to do ethics declaration. And I'm going to say this is procedure 8 new staff. Okay. It's a new firm one, and here I will go and copy and paste the procedure from the annual ethics declaration. Just want to give you a chance to see that progress through, additional description and so forth. Now, what am I going to do differently? The nature, let's just quickly just document the nature, the timing. Now I want to indicate that every time a new staff member is added, so we're going to do the annual ethics declaration on a certain time, but when a new staff member is added, I want that staff member to also get a declaration. So it might be on another day. So Caseware Cloud activity is going to now be the item to pick. So I don't want to have to remember or let HR remember when a new staff member gets appointed, they need to do the ethics declaration. I want to say whenever a new person is added to Caseware Cloud, they must get the ethics declaration because that's part of our take on for new staff. So Caseware Cloud activity, when I add a new staff. This is responsible and applicable to, again, firm personnel or staff. Caseware Cloud activity, here's a variety of options. I'm going to choose add staff. Now, just a side note. When I add a new person to an entity, I might be sending them a separate little confidentiality declaration or whatever the case is. That's fine when I add someone. When I remove a staff or mark that staff member as inactive, I can't have the task sent to that individual because they're not going to be on cloud anymore. So if you want to use the staff remove functionality, remember that that's going to be where you're going to say, when I remove a staff member from Caseware Cloud, let the quality manager or the HR manager or the this and the that person know that they've been removed and make sure that they did actually resign or are actually no longer working with us, or they did hand in their laptop, or whatever it is that you want to do from a quality management perspective when that person is removed from the entity, from Caseware Cloud, marked as inactive, or whatever this other function option is that you are choosing. All right. But for today, we are adding new staff. We want that new staff member to get the ethics declaration. Fantastic. All right. Extend, we want all staff, all of them to get it. And now assignees, well, I don't have this person on Caseware Cloud yet, so I'm not going to select them from users or from groups. I'm just going to say include the new user. That's all. Okay. And that's that. Save. And now I can sign this off. I should be able to sign this off. Why can I not yet sign it off? Let me just quickly check. What did I? I wasn't busy with this one. Sorry, guys. I was busy with procedure 8. Sign this one off. That's the new staff one, where I had said extend when I add a new staff member. All right, that's the one that I can sign off now. Sign off. Please don't leave it here like I have for procedure response copy and paste. You must do the actual copy and paste. Good. So those are my 2 procedures for the ethics declaration. Let's go see what the review and publish looks like. I now have procedures for ethics declarations, procedure 8 new staff, procedure 8 annual declaration. I've got warnings that says, hang on, you haven't got a task linked yet. Okay, we're going to get to that just now. That's the same one. And then we still need the procedure for the training register. So let's go do the procedure for the training register. Procedure responses. I don't have a mandatory response for training register, so let's go look for it in our training, in our procedure library. So what was the linked procedure policy that I had? Let me just quickly change the column widths here so that I can see the policies. The policy number that we had back then was policy 34. So I'm going to filter for it. And I've got here procedure 175, personnel training requirements, remedial actions implemented, personnel developing competence and retention. Those are my 3 options. Let's pick procedure 175. Okay, just because I believe that one to be the most appropriate. Select the procedure. What do we need to remember? Link the policy. That policy was policy 34. So we just click that one, it's in there. And there, remember again, you can modify it because it's just a library one, it's a firm one. You can document the nature. And then we're going to get to the timing option. Now with timing, we are going to select the manual option. We've done scheduled for all the staff ethics declaration. We've done Caseware Cloud activity for the new staff. Now we want to do manual. Okay, because I can't anticipate when this is going to be done. This will be done applicable to all staff and again to extend to all. So even if I say firm personnel or everyone in the audit department, that would be the link between these 2. And then this will just be for all staff. Whenever they attend training, they need to go and create a record of having attended that training. So I can allocate it to all staff. Good. Notes effective from, to, etc. And that's been completed. If I now want to go and see whether it's ready for sign-off, I just filter for firm. I see, yes, it's ready for sign-off, and I sign it off. Just to go and check, review, and publish again. I know I sound like a broken record, but I want us to be sure that we understand how we can use this optimally. So there's my training requirements, task, procedure in rather. And again, it has a procedure, just says, hang on, you may want to add a task. We're almost done for these 2. Okay, I know it's a long, lengthy process, but hopefully you can also see how these things work together. So next up, we have to go and do the tasks. Tasks, remember, are the documented evidence that the action was performed, that the procedure was executed. So there are no mandatory tasks. So we just have the library. And in the library, I'm going to go and look for the procedure. Procedure 8 is the procedure that I want to go look for. Oh, Let's just go with Proc 8. Oh, not Proc 9. And then we can see the filter for the annual ethics declaration. So that's the one I'm going to pick and select the task. Remember your linked procedure that you want to include here. That linked procedure was procedure 8. So let's just remember procedure 8, new staff, as well as procedure 8, the annual declaration. So you can see both of them are there. I'm going to put both of them as ticked. I've got the title. I can change the information. So yeah, I can change the information as may be necessary. Then when I get to this part that says form editor, if I was to complete a new one, so not from the library, it would be blank, and that would be indicated to me by the fact that this little block is not yet completed. But because this comes from a library, there is already a, let's say, a starting point, a form completed, and I need to go and check if I'm happy with the content of this form, if I want to add to it. Hopefully you don't want to remove, but you can also remove from it. So this then takes you into a JSON format of the screen. And this is basically the form that you're going to see. So the person completing the form, their ethics declaration, will have to include their name and surname, the date when they're completing it, and then start with a declaration. I'm just going to scroll down so you can see there's little blocks to tick. There are fields to include. They can add extra columns. They can add content into little text fields. I've got a variety of options to include in my forms. And right at the bottom, then even money laundering, no, CLAR, and conclusion. And then right at the bottom, I've got my little submit button. Okay, so this is the form that we designed for you as a starting point for an ethics declaration. I'm going to go right to the top and just show you how to add a field in here. You can choose to have a text field or a check box or something like that. The basic ones are there. There are some advanced ones, which really the only one I would imagine is probably to include a date that you're going to use. Okay, so let's do a basic one. Let's say we want to know how old you are. Can we ask that? Let's for today say we want to ask that. Or how many years have you been at the firm or something like that. So we want to include the number. Oh, it looks like our number's not going to be there. Let's do text area. Something. Oh, guys, I'm clicking instead of dragging. I want to do a number. I'm going to drag the field. It looks like I almost need a cup of coffee, as I'm sure you do too. Then it tells me, tell me a little bit more about this field. What is the name going to be? I'm going to say, how old are you? Where do you want the label? So it says top, you can see it's above the field. Placeholder, e.g. 34 years. Or just 34. That's what I want you to fill in. And I can play around with it if I want to. I can add multiple, but I can do lots of things. What is important is in the validation, you want to mark required to make sure the person completes it. Okay, so I'm going to click that required. That's the most important one to complete. And then that's what it's going to look like. I'm going to say save, and that's the field. How old are you? E.g. 34. That's what you need to complete. Okay. And so you can add more if you want. You can delete, you can edit, and so forth. Once you're done, you click Save Form, and that then basically creates or saves your template for that task. The rest of the dialog looks the same as we've been used to, applicable standard, links, etc. And I will go and save this and sign it off. That is my ethics declaration. That's the one that's been linked now for both the, so we can actually also just link here for linked procedures. If we want to just include the linked procedures, we've linked it for both the new staff ethics declaration and the normal ethics declaration. And then we go and create the one for the training register. So yeah, we can either then say training, we can do link procedure, or I can just see there's my task, training attendance. And I'll select that task, go and link the procedure again. The procedure was 175. So make sure that's linked so I don't have to come back and link it later on. There's the form editor, a lot simpler. Okay, so you really can make it as long or as short as you need it. course name, etc., submit, and save form. Go down for the rest. That all seems fine. Save, and ready for sign off. And there you go. Great stuff. Now let's go and have a look at our review and publish. Are we ready to publish now? I've got objectives, risks, everything, no errors, no warnings. As a reminder, you can publish with warnings. You cannot publish with errors. Then let's say my co-partner or the UR will come and review this and see that they're comfortable with it, etc., etc. And only once I click approve and publish will this content be taken forward to the Operate tab. You can see my Operate menu, still completely blank, nothing in there. I'll go back to my design, review and publish. I'll go and approve the content. So we are comfortable with this. Then it tells me it's been approved, and then I will publish. Are you sure you want to publish this version? This is version number 1 of your firm's system of quality management. Yes. Your system has been published, and when I now go over to Operate, ta-da, there's my system of quality management. And now my staff, who are almost want to say just normal users, they have access to my system of quality management, and they have to comply with these policies, procedures, and tasks. If they want to see it, they can click on a little button and see a version of that same dialogue, but they can't change it, okay? And they can even filter or search for certain things, etc. A question that I had earlier was, can I print this version of the SoQM? There are 2 ways, and we'll also in the next session look at this in detail, but there is a system of quality management, either the table that I showed you just now or the actual manual. This manual one is really fantastic. It's got various expand options and collapse options. That's expanded, the colors there, blue being objective, red being your risk, the dark green being the policy, lighter green your procedure, and the orange being your task. And again, you can look at them, open up the dialogues as you may need to. You can collapse all, and if you can see, if you use the Alt button and left click or right click, you can also then open certain things for those as well. Okay. So there you can also collapse partially, etc. Can I print this into PDF? Yes, there is a print function, but there's a big but. If I select print, it will print. I can save it as PDF, or I can print it out if I want to, whatever the case is. I can add my firm logo there. We've just added Caseware one because this is one of our demonstration websites. The date that I printed it is indicated there, who published it, etc., and a specific ID which is unique to this version. Okay, because of course, remember your system can change. So right at the bottom of your system also, there's a, just scroll down, there is a disclaimer to say, just note, SQM is a live system. And so what you are seeing now was as at the date of being printed. If you want to see the rest of the live system with the interaction and with the tasks and all those things that's been completed, you need to go to the actual site. And then we give you your firm's site. So that CQS one would be your firm's instance. All right, so you can print to PDF, but of course the system should be used as part of the live system. Then just something else, going back to the design mode, something that is not required, and that's why I'm only showing it to you now, something that's not required for publishing. However, it is part of the design of your system of quality management, and that is your monitoring activities. So as part of your design, you have a link to monitoring activities, even though that actually shows and is saved on the monitor tab or the monitor module. So monitoring activities, it's very similar to your policies and procedures and your tasks. We have created mandatory monitoring activities because they will monitor all the mandatory policies and procedures. So I'll show you some of those just now. There's also a library for you to create additional monitoring activities. Right. So what are the monitoring activities we need to do for today? There is your annual declarations taken. Someone has to go and check that annual declarations have in fact been done. So annual declarations taken, we're going to go in, we're going to see what do we need to complete there. So this is a mandatory one, so I can't change it, but what do I need to tell me? The standard requires the firm's monitoring activities to be designed for a variety of items, but the mandatory ones are only part of the so-called implementation and operation of the firm's policies and procedures. You'll know from auditing also, you cannot go and test something if you haven't first checked the design and the implementation thereof. So something, for example, like testing procedures or monitoring activities for testing the risk assessment procedures or compliance with applicable requirements of the standards, that will be other monitoring procedures. But the policies and procedures, the monitoring activities linked to the policies and procedures are mostly then ones linked to the implementation and operation of the policies and procedures. So that's the one linked there. Which area is this linked to? Annual ethics declaration is relevant to firm level. So you may also have a similar procedure at engagement level. This one is at firm level. And the relevant component in this case is, of course, your relevant ethical requirements. You can then go and document the nature of this monitoring activity, which will really be to document more information, and then to document the scheduling of. Are you going to actually do this manually, or are you going to schedule this to happen at a certain point in time? So scheduling, this is interesting now, is that scheduling, remember, you can only schedule it for after it should have been done. So as much as I would want to schedule the monitoring of the annual ethics declarations for Monday as well, we can't do that because I'm only going to send the declaration to the staff on Monday. Then I'm going to give them a week or 2 or 3 to do it. And then only can I say, right, guys, you've got until, let's say, the end of August to do it or the first week of September to do it. And only thereafter, then I'll go and check that you've done it. So when I schedule my my monitoring activity, I'm going to actually schedule it to be done, let's say, again, yearly, but I'm going to actually only do it on the 6th of September, for example, to set the frequency there. I'm going to check all staff declarations. There's nothing else required there. The objectives and everything's linked there, which is great. Even the linked risks I can include and so forth, and then sign off that monitoring activity. Okay, that's the one for the annual ethics declarations. I just want to also add one for the training. I'm seeing one question coming in. Please feel free to start recording questions if you have any. Just want to quickly for the training records also just do a monitoring activity from the library. Oh, I forgot that one there. Forgot to now write down that one, but let's say competence. That's the fancy word we used for competence of the staff. This is now network engagement members, service providers. Assigned to SQM, assigning personnel. The other one that, yeah, that was the training one that we want to do. Just quickly want to see. Personnel, developing competence and retention, and there we've got professional education, etc., etc. So I'm going to just link that one to show you one. Have it there, sub area, firm level, because it's not the staff of the individual one. Component, it's probably your resources. There's your procedure. Timing, well, let's say we're going to do that manually, or we're going to do it every 3 months, or whatever the case may be. You're going to document the extent, how you're going to select it. And remember also that with the extent, you're going to have to document it before you can save it because it's got a red asterisk, okay? But you can change that as well. So what I foresee to happen probably is going to be that you're going to design these, and then if you use an external consultant, they might come in and say, actually, we're going to pick different ones. And they will then have the responsibility to ensure, sorry, that these ones are all addressing the needs that are required. So for firm, there we go. We can sign that one off as well. Okay. So that needs to be, you need monitoring activities for each of your policies and procedures to have a complete system of quality management. Good. I've got a question here to say, is it acceptable not to have a task for each procedure? Michaela, yes, absolutely, it is acceptable. So what our understanding was that when a firm has designed procedures, it is possible, firstly, that not each procedure is going to actually have a separate form. So let's say, for example, we say firms use their audit methodology and you identify the specific methodology, or you say you document your acceptance procedures in this form in your audit methodology. You don't then need a task on SQM that needs to be completed to show that that's been done. So if it can be evidenced in some other way, so maybe the person that checks that the team did in fact use the right document, or did in fact complete the acceptance performance procedures, will go and check the relevant document in your firm's methodology as you'd indicated in the procedure. Or it might also be that you still have a manual or separate register for, let's say, for consultations, right? That you don't want to have a task for consultations on SQM for whatever reason, or some firms at some point was very pushed for time to say, I need a system ASAP. I don't have time now to go and develop all the tasks, to basically go and recreate all my PDF template working papers onto SQM. Let me just get the procedures in there, and then next year I will put in my tasks piecemeal. So yes, you don't need a task as such. So in this case, we happen to have the tasks because, of course, I want to show you what the tasks look like. And in our next session, I'm going to show you also how to complete those tasks. But you can just go up to policy, and that's why where you didn't have a task, you just had a warning and not an error. Right, that was a very relevant question. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of today's session. So if you have any additional questions, please feel free to ask those questions. At the same time, if you want to attend this afternoon session that starts in basically an hour and 4 minutes, you are welcome to join us for that one. Otherwise, I would be hoping to see you on Tuesday, same time as this morning's session, to continue with the system of quality management, but then just the rest of the part. Right, so if you need to go, you are welcome to log off and go. If you have any questions, you're welcome to submit those. I'll hang around for a little bit and then I'll close off the webinar if there aren't any questions coming through soon. Thank you for your time taken to attend, and I really look forward to seeing you again soon. Ladies and gentlemen, I have 2 questions that I'm going to just address. The one asks if you are able to print the independence declaration and training forms for manual sign-off. I think you will be able to. Let me quickly do that while I see if it's possible. The challenge, of course, is that if you don't do it online, you won't have it saved online. So ideally, you would want to actually have a person complete this themselves. Let me just quickly go and see. There is a space where I've already created one of the training tasks. Training, okay, let's say training today. So you need to create a task with a specific name. And then it creates this form. Just wait a minute, it will come through. So I wouldn't advise that because it's all linked to tasks and things like that on cloud, because if you're going to print this now, it's going to actually show the date when you've printed it, etc. It's more to do with doing it online in the system all the time. Yeah, so that's the one question that we had. The other question is, we have a small firm of around 10 to 15 staff, one partner. The firm may not be able to afford to buy SQM for 15 users. Can the design be done through SQM but not have all users registered on the system? The benefit from having the system on SQM is really in having it online, as I showed you now with the tasks, etc. There is a way in which to optimize. So I would recommend, if you don't mind, I'm just trying to quickly see if I can copy your email address. I will ask someone from Caseware Africa to contact you in terms of just providing you a quote. It's really not that expensive, and if there may be a way in which to accommodate your staff. There are different options, so I'll try my best to get someone from Caseware Africa to accommodate. If I haven't copied you in on that by the time you attend the next session, please just remind me again so that I do that and let someone know to get hold of you. All right. Any other questions? So really, the system has been designed to optimize the technology, which is this automation and the provision of the tasks, keeping track of the versions. You know, if you download the version, the template documents, how do you know what the different versions are? Whereas the system can tell you when someone comes, let's say your audit regulator comes to inspect you next year, August, and they want to see what was done in your ethics declaration this year. If you changed your form from this year to next year, you won't be able to necessarily see or show them how the system or the versions changed. But if you can go into SQM and see, oh, that's when the version changed from this to that, then they'll be able to see you actually did use the right template. It's not that you used the wrong template when you completed the form. So the version management, the individual documents, automation, all of that is really the benefit in using SQM. Right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your participation.